Snuck that one in on me. All right, you can all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is back behind you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, under recognition of visitors, Tim Moore, signed up to speak.
Yeah, I'm Tim Moore. Just wanted to let you guys know that the Waterloo Community Action Committee has moved its meeting to every third Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. I'm sorry, Tuesday. Every third Tuesday at 7 p.m. here. The next meeting is next Tuesday. We're going to discuss some fundraiser activities for the alumni football game that's coming up on June 16th.
In the media center, right? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Terry? Here. Whittlesey?
Here.
Gump?
Here.
Fletcher? Here. Jones? Here.
Meeting is called to order. Under the President's report, I don't have anything right now. May have something later. So, Superintendent.
Okay. I have a few updates, brief presentation here. First of all, I had indicated last month that we were going to be sending out, I'll stop for a moment. You were able to make some more copies?
Yes.
Ready? If you did not receive an agenda, there's more copies back in the back now. Thank you. We were looking to get some feedback from our community, from graduates, from our faculty and staff. So then the last 2 weeks, we've sent out electronically surveys to each of those groups. We created those surveys at no cost to the district. They've been distributed electronically. They're on the homepage of our website. And while we would like to get that out to as many as we possibly can, we're also cognizant of not wanting to have an expense there. So as things currently stand, we've received 127 responses as of today on the community survey. We've received 35 on the graduate survey. And at the faculty's staff survey, we're up to 40 responses. So we'll continue to get the word out that those are there. And we'll probably have a communication going home with students soon about various things, so we'll put that in there to the students too. One of the concerns is reaching the broader community. We have 8,000 residents, and how we get the word out to those. And so I put in the email that I sent out to our list, so about 400 people, if they would forward that on to people they think may help, and hopefully people keep forwarding and we can get some good feedback. So at some point, maybe next month, depending on how the feedback is coming in, maybe in June at the latest, we'll have some summaries of some different things that I'll present to you. I'm going to skip over the second for a moment because I have that in the presentation. This alumni football game on June 16th, there's going to be a game that's held here against Rootstown. It's the alumni. Last year this was at Rootstown. There was a company that organized the game last year that does that stuff as their business. This year our KPO has decided that they want to take on that responsibility of doing all of that so that they can make additional money. As you know, the KPO is one of our district support organizations. They're covered under our district liability insurance. One of the things that you'll see on the agenda here tonight under the consent agenda is for you to officially approve them doing that activity under the KPO. That's officially needed for us to make sure there's no liability related issues. Participants will be signing a waiver that we're working on with our attorney right now. But it promises to be Marcia Landon and Josh Allen are the two that are kind of chairing this, but they're trying to get a lot of community support in various avenues. The music boosters will be running concession stands. The athletic boosters are assisting with the program that's getting done. The Community Action Committee has had discussions. There's been no decisions, but they've talked about possibly tying in some other community-related events here during the day leading up to the game. So promises to be hopefully a good thing for the community. ultimately the money that's raised with the KPO portion will come back to the school district. So we thank them for taking on that initiative. Safety Committee, we were already in the process of planning, as shared before, to revise our intruder drill to meet the philosophy of the ALICE, which is the alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate procedure that Sheriff Doak asked the school districts in Portage County to transition to for the start of the next school year. As I shared before, we had 2 staff members that went through the training last summer, and we've done an initial overview of what ALICE looks like with our faculty and staff here. A more detailed follow-up will be done with them, Waterloo specific, in August before the school year starts. But we put together, out of the incidents that we had right after the Chardon incident, after our meeting that we held for the community on what our procedures are and stuff, we decided to expand the safety committee bigger than I think we envisioned to begin with. Carrie Savata has been very helpful in spearheading a lot of this effort. But we had our first meeting with this safety committee back on the 28th of March. So we had 11 district employees that were part of it, plus we had Sheriff Doak, Major Massimi, Tom Herman from the State Highway Patrol, also has students here, and Bob Burgess. He's got grandchildren here. He's retired police chief, I believe, of Brimfield. We're meeting again on Wednesday, April 18th to continue to work on what we're doing. We're also going to be joined, I believe, by representatives from both Atwater and Randolph fire departments. They're interested in being part of the process and actually going through the training that we're going to do next August too. So I think there'll be a lot of good stuff that will come out of that committee that eventually we'll bring to you what's happening. And then the last thing here, I wanted to go over some of the stuff that's later on in our agenda to talk a little bit about where we're headed here for next year with our financial situation. So I'm going to move this up here quickly. So the first thing I want to do, this doesn't touch on the finances here. But the first thing that I want to do is talk quickly about, this may have been in the local papers, I'm not sure. I know it was in some other papers, and I'm not sure if it was in the Alliance Review or the Record Courier, to be honest. But one of the things that the state of Ohio is looking to do, they've applied for a waiver through the federal government for the No Child Left Behind provisions, certain ones. And one of the things that's in their waiver is changing how the state report card system is done. I'm currently aware that the ratings are excellent with distinction, excellent, effective, continuous improvement, academic watch, academic emergency. What they're doing is suggesting, and it actually in the proposed legislation that's come out of this midterm budget review from Governor Kasich is really pushing hard on this. They're suggesting switching over to a letter grade system. So what they did for the application for the federal government was they ran simulations of where districts currently stand off of the 2011 report card, which came out in August last year. And then they compared it to these new criteria, which are more stringent, which is one of the things that they're looking to do, and where districts would actually be under this proposed new system. So there's no, as it stands right now, the federal government needs to approve the waiver that Ohio's applied for. I will tell you that in reading some other things in Education Week, there's a number of states that have already applied and been accepted for their waivers, and I think at least 5 or 6 of them have moved to this letter grade system. So this must be something that the federal government looks favorably upon. But at the same time, it also has to be passed legislatively here in Ohio, because these rankings, the performance ratings, are actually in the revised code. So they put this into language that's currently moving its way through the House and the Senate. Where it ends up, I don't know. They have hearings next week, I think, with the Senate committee on this. So this may change. But I thought I would show this because you can see here where Waterloo would stand. So last year we were ranked excellent. And these are all the schools in the county that these simulations came through on. If they were to use that overall grade system, overall we would be at a B, which is that fourth column to the right. And then the different criteria that go into that overall ranking. So the percent of indicators met, we would be in an A. Performance index, which is that score that the max you can get is 120, be at a B. Value added, we would be at a B, which looks at student growth year to year. And then gap closing is what they're suggesting to replace what they were calling adequate yearly progress. Gap closing would be calculated a little differently than AYP is calculated. But you can see here we got a B. But as you take a look here and compare us with other districts in our county, again, I think this helps to validate that the things that are happening here at Waterloo, are pretty good. When, we have work to do, as anybody does. We acknowledge that. But as we continue to look at these things, whether it's this or that Board of Regents report on remedial coursework for students in college, where we looked at a few months ago, we see that we're ranking pretty well with our districts in the county here, and even with the state averages on different things. So for what that's worth, I just wanted to show this tonight. I don't know that this will ever actually take effect, but this is the direction that the state's looking to move. And I wanted to comment, they have indicated that they want to start using this system this fall, but they're not sure whether or not everything will align, and there's groups that are campaigning to change the way different components of this are calculated and change when they would actually implement it and other things like that. So it remains to be seen what will happen. Any questions on this?
One of the things that really caught my eye when we looked at this is we said, okay, if we looked at how we're ranked today, it's this column here. And you can see you've got Aurora with excellent with distinction, you've got Crestwood excellent, Falcon Academy excellent, Garfield excellent, Ridgetown excellent, and Waterloo excellent. So you got Aurora here, and then you've got the block of the other schools that are between second, third, fourth, whatever you want to look at as far as the county levels comparatively in the county. And then you've got a block of effective schools again. Well, then when you look at the overall grade, those same schools, Aurora is the A, the same ones that were excellent are Bs. But then if you break it down with Waterloo, you can see we're 1A and 3 Bs. Okay. Ridgetown is 1A, 2 Bs, and a C. Garfield is 1A and 3 Bs, just like us. And Falcon Academy is an A, a B, 2 A's, a B, and a C. And then Crestwood's an A, 2 B's, and a D. So I think this goes to prove something we've been saying for a long time, that we're really doing, and hopefully all the students here tonight agree, that we're really doing a pretty good job of educating our kids and providing them with the best education we can. And I mean, this again just proves that we're, Aurora, if you look at the financial makeup of Aurora, let's just say they have a little more financial means to work with than we do. And after that, we're right in that tier. Whether you can say, okay, we're second or third or fourth, we could, it's really, there's not a hill of beans between them, really, if you think about it. But we're doing a very good job. And then when you couple that with the county's preparedness, where they actually looked at students that are in college taking remedial courses, we actually were pretty, to my opinion, pretty far ahead, number one in that study. So I think that those things just prove that the staff is doing an excellent job, the administration is doing an excellent job, the students are doing an excellent job, and And it's really something we should all be very proud of. You know, when you look at that and you look at our tax base and what we spend, I mean, we pay, our community pays the lowest effective millage legally allowed by the state of Ohio. So I think we get a pretty good bargain for our product. So, but that was, when I read it, it just kind of, as I started looking at it a little more deeply, it just jumped out and said, well, you know, hey, this is good. This is showing that we're, and I was on the board when I think they called them efficiency tests back then, when they came out. And there were a lot of people, you know, everybody was looking around trying to figure out, what are we going to do? We've come so far and over that time frame. Really, it's just a great thing for the staff and everybody to be commended.
Well said. Anything else on this? So then we get into the news that's not so good, and that's the finances here. So I want to kind of walk you through where we're at, where we're heading, and that ties in directly to items that you'll see later on here on the agenda. So this is our current 5-year forecast. And you can see there for fiscal year 13, which is the year that we're working on eliminating the deficit for, that we have a projected deficit of $380,450. Okay, but a few comments on that. That's not actually the amount of money that we need to cut. Okay, because a few different reasons why, and I'll explain. One, back in 2008, when the board had the state come in and do the performance audit, the state auditor's office, one of the findings that they put in the report was a recommendation to the treasurer that he should be building in severance for retirees, which he had never done because you just don't know year to year who's going to retire. So in particular for fiscal year 13, there's 3 retirements that were projected and only 2 of those are happening. So when we go back and adjust that amount within the system of where this is done and put the person back in who's staying and take out the person that was going to replace them, that puts the number up to, I think it's $420,000 that actually is what needs to be eliminated to get us back to 0. Okay, then we talked about last year, we can't cut just to get to 0. We have to have some kind of leeway because there's expenses that come up that we don't anticipate. You know, for example, and there's many, but for example, a few weeks ago we had some new special education students move into the district. One of those students needed to go to a special program over in Southeast. You know, so that's an additional expense that we had not forecasted in that we're going to need. So last year, and we're doing it again this year, we want to have about a $100,000 cushion. And I know last month when we talked about that, it was asked how we're doing this year with that cushion, and we expect that that'll be gone here at the end of the year. So our total target that we're looking to eliminate for the beginning by July 1 for fiscal year 13 is $520,000. Okay, and I'll remind you, this is on top of the $1 million that we did for fiscal year 12 right now, this year. So where are we going to get that? Well, we're going to squeeze $50,000 out of the building budgets, which were already squeezed last year. And then other supply areas, we think we can save some money. That may mean that we're waxing the halls a little less frequently than we do. You know, but we're going to be making some decisions there, but we believe 50,000 is a realistic number. As you're aware, last month we passed the resolution to increase pay to participate fees 3 times where they were, also implementing a $1,000 a year family cap. So we have the new numbers up here for what sports and clubs and band at the high school level will cost for next year. When we actually, and just a reminder on this, with how we came up with 33,319 is the actual number that we will be taking off of the 520. But how we came up with that we build in a 30% reduction factor in participation because we figure we will lose some students. We don't know how many. We thought 30% would be a good number to go with. And we had already budgeted in to the 5-year forecast that you saw. That forecast already had 54,280 budgeted in. Our actual after 1 year cycle of pay to participate from November of 10 through October of 11 was about $7,000 less than what was budgeted. So when we calculate the additional revenue, subtract off, or add that to what we've already budgeted in, subtract off the difference from what was budgeted to what we collected, subtract off the reduction from what we don't bring in because of the family cap, that puts $33,319 as the number that we can use to take off of that deficit amount of $520,000. Okay, and just to make a note on that too, these amounts seem high, and they are, as far as what we're charging students, but as we've acknowledged before, we're transferring at the end of the year $218,000 after all expenses and revenue are brought in with athletics and clubs. And band, we're transferring $218,000 from our general fund to offset the deficit. So with what we're doing here with pay to participate, that number is still in the $180,000 range that extracurriculars are costing the district. So we're not at a point where we're generating money by doing what we did. We're not at a point where we're even close to breaking even. So the rest of this then is going to have to come through reductions of personnel, programming, and negotiations. We're in negotiations. We actually have, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but some of the deadlines, we have 2 agreements that have been ratified by the union, the OPSI union and the secretary union. And we have one that just today was tentatively agreed upon. It still needs to go to the teacher union, the WEA, for approval of their membership. We'll talk about that a little later. So where we currently stand right now then with these reductions, this is what we see at the moment is going to be needed to reduce. There'll be 1 core teacher at the elementary, which will be done through attrition. We have a retirement we just won't replace. There'll be 1 middle school teacher at the middle school, again through attrition. Retirement, we're not replacing. There'll be 1 music teacher, grades 6 through 12. I'll go back to this in a minute and talk about the impact. 6 resource room tutors, 8 Title I tutors, and 1 elementary middle school media center aide. Now just a little bit of detail on here. You're going to see later on when we actually get to the item with the suspension of contracts that there's more than 1 elementary core teacher listed. You're actually going to be asked tonight to take action on 3. What's going to happen is our elementary school is going to be designated next year for Title I purposes. They're going to be designated what they call school-wide. There's 2 types of services you can have with Title. It's either student targeted assistance. Thank you. Targeted assistance is where you can only work with the economically disadvantaged students. Once a building reaches a 40% free and reduced count or higher, which the elementary school is now at, they can go ahead and do a plan which Ms. Early is working on that will allow them to become what they call school-wide, which is where you can use the Title I money for any student in that building. So we've talked to the ODE because of our financial situation and the rules that are in place with the federal government. We are going to shift the bulk of our money from hiring tutors part-time like we do currently to bringing back 2 of the 3 core teachers that are going to be recommended to you tonight. It'd actually be 2 because the other one's attrition. So what will happen next year is 2 of our elementary teachers. It will look the same. They'll be in a classroom in a grade level just like they are now. But they're behind the scenes, they'll be paid with title funds because of the ability to do that. What that means, I'm going to jump down to these title tutors then. What that means on that end is that we will be losing a number of those tutors that have done a really good job here over the years. We believe, when we have to wait until July to be able to do some of these things with recall, because the federal government, we have to wait for the appropriations to finalize in July. But if we get what's projected, we believe that in addition to the 2 core teachers, that we will be able to recall 2 tutors for our building. One will go to the elementary school and one will go to the middle school. But we're recommending to reduce all of them tonight because we don't know where that stands. President Obama has flatlined the funding for both Title I and Title 6B, which is the resource room I'll talk about in a moment. So that at least is good, but it still has to go through the process through the House and the Senate before that's official. We don't know where that'll end up. And there's something else that is down the road that we may have to worry about, which is that deal that the federal government struck to continue operating last fall. If that super committee can't reach agreement on where to cut the budgets by, I think it's January, then there's an automatic $3.2 billion of money that's targeted for K-12 education that automatically gets slashed. And we don't know what that impact will necessarily be on us. This past year they cut an amount, I don't know the aggregate amount total that they cut. It translated in, it was in the millions, maybe billions too. It translated into $2,000 lost on our end locally by the time it filtered down this low. So we'll have to keep our eyes on that. The music teacher position, what will be lost in doing that is, why is music up there? Music is up there because we are going to be able to at least keep music program K through 12, but it'll look a little bit different. We anticipate that with that change, we will be losing the 2 elective classes here at the high school, which is history, music history, and music appreciation. And at the middle school level, if I'm not mistaken, it's choir, correct? But choir, there's apparently a miscommunication out there. The choir is still intended to be here in the form that it's in at the high school level for next school year under the scenario that's being recommended tonight. These resource room tutors, this is another one that really does not impact our bottom line at all. Okay, actually, this is the only one that doesn't impact our bottom line. This is Title 6B money, which is federal money again, and it has to go towards special education purposes. And Title 6B does not have the same flexibility that Title I does. We cannot reduce a teacher and then bring them back under 6B and save some money on our operating side. That's not permitted under 6B. We're recommending here tonight to reduce the 6 tutors that we currently have. Again, they do a fantastic job. This has nothing to do with performance. And what we're going to do once that money appropriates here in July is we intend to hire 3 full-time special education teachers. And I want to be very clear on this, because when July rolls around and people see we're hiring teachers, I'm sure the first question is going to be, where did the district get money? And we need to be very clear that this is money that can only be used for that purpose. And in the past, we've chose to use that on tutors, and moving forward, we're choosing to use it on teachers. And why are we choosing to use it on teachers? The teachers that we'll be able to hire will be able to be, they'll be licensed, fully licensed special education teachers that will be able to have a caseload of students, that will be able to write IEPs. And what we envision here, we've tried to move to an inclusion model where the students are in the regular classroom with supportive teachers. But that doesn't work for every kid here. And so what we want to be able to do is have a resource room setting for the kids that need it in certain subjects. And doing this move will allow us to be able to do that. And we think ultimately it's a better fit for what we're trying to do here with our special education population. And then the media, elementary, middle school media center aide, last year we, for all intents and purposes, eliminated the media specialist for the district. We moved her full-time into teaching. She does 1 hour a day during her duties as media specialist. We're further reducing the capabilities we have in the media center. So this is going to basically take the middle school and elementary media center and have it from being staffed and open a full day to half day. So as we look at a summary of all of this, that $520,000 is coming from the $50,000 in budgets and supplies, building budgets and supplies, the $33,319 in the additional revenue from pay to participate. And then the rest of that money is coming through reductions in personnel, programming, and union negotiations. Finally, this ties into what's on the agenda here for tonight too. Where do we go from here? Because as you see back on this slide at the beginning, we're trying to get back to fiscal year 13, but as we move forward, fiscal year 14 is almost 1.7 million deficit. Fiscal year 15, almost 3.5. Fiscal year 16, 5.6 million. So as we look at this, these cuts we're doing, while they'll get us through this next year, we still have a huge obstacle here that is only going to be fixed through an increased revenue source of significant proportion. And unfortunately, with the way that the state sets things up, that significant proportion option is a levy. So we have two more possibilities here this calendar year. August 7th special election and November 6th general election. At our work session that we had, I think it was March 19th, we had a long discussion on what to do. It was decided that we would go back on August 7th for a 5-year emergency levy that is the equivalent of the 7.95 mils that we asked in March that was defeated. When you do an emergency levy, they certify a dollar amount, not a millage amount. So the actual dollar amount that 7.95 mils brings in per year is $1,266,015. Okay, and so again, this may be somewhere where questions may come up. If people see a dollar amount now instead of 7.95 mils, what we need to be relaying is that's what the auditor told us 7.95 mils equates to. That's where that dollar amount came from. Okay, we have 2 more attempts to be able to get it and keep it here. And as we know from what we just went through, if we're not able to pass it here in calendar year 12, when we get into the cycle of elections in calendar year 13, that dollar amount or millage amount is going to need to be higher because we're going to have a lost year of collections. Okay? Which is why we went from the 5 mils we were at in November to the 7.95 we were at here in March and continue to be for August. So that's kind of where we stand. And tonight on the agenda, in the consent agenda, you'll see that we have the second and final resolution that's necessary to be able to place this on August 7th, the ballot August 7th. So that's what I have. Are there any questions on any of the reductions or the financial components? Okay. Let me move this back.
treasurer's report?
Dr. will be making some adjustments to the agenda, but he'll go over those. We'll be going to consent agenda.
Okay. All right, Diane, anything else?
Let's take a look past that. Maplewood students from Waterloo this year that going to BPA competition. Tessica, Waterloo High School top 10 in desktop publishing and fundamental word processing skills. And Emily Mueller from Waterloo, second in banking and finance, and she will advance to state. And the Maplewood IT students headed to state is Jeff Cozart from Waterloo. And again, these are like a month behind, so next month we'll have like all the current other students that are going to be recognized to go to state. And just the parent presentation was pretty well attended this year at Maplewood. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, Jen, anything in the legislative?
Yeah, a few things. As Andy spoke about earlier, we have a couple bills in Columbus. House Bill 487. As I looked over the meat of the bill, it's basically touching on the districts that might be able to take advantage of consolidation of services. Also, they're addressing school districts that are under fiscal watch or emergency, that they entered into shared services agreements. And those are things that are on the agenda that might apply to us down the road. Senate Bill 316 is a little bit more distinctive in that Andy addressed the rankings and standards. One of the things that I took away from the investigations that I've seen so far is that this bill is I think it would be pretty progressive if this bill went through this year without a year's implementation, giving the school districts a year to implement it and to become more familiar with the switchover. And it also touches on teacher retesting provisions, which are fairly complicated. But the one thing that I did take away this past month was I attended the state legislative conference in which we went over a lot of this. Just as I kind of thought, everything from the state's perspective is going to be slow. There's lots of talk, there's lots of motivation, but it's at a very, very slow pace. I don't see much coming out of there in the near future. Obviously, our mid-biennial review from the state's perspective with the governor, they're discussing both these bills as we speak. And the questions and the interactions we had from the other school districts that were at the state conference, we were right with them. We had the same questions, and we were looking at garnering some of the answers. There is no answers. Nothing's going to happen fast, and quite frankly, our representatives that were there said, we hear you, but there's nothing we can tell you. There's not a magic bullet out there that's going to help districts like ours in the way of funding and addressing some of the problems that we have. So the thing that I took away from the legislative conference is that we're not alone, one, and that from the state's perspective, it was as I thought, that they kind of say this is a community issue. As you read in the briefcase, I think most of us get the briefcase. It's periodical from the state. that this is a 15-year anniversary on the DeRoff ruling, which deems Ohio's school funding system unconstitutional. We've touched on this with different state education leaders in the past, and they said, yes, you know, it is unconstitutional to fund our schools through the levies and tax dollars that we pay. But he's doing it, I'm doing it, we're doing it, and there's no other alternatives to funding schools at this time. We're presently waiting Governor Kasich's funding plan, and that's the best we can do. I believe, and I believe last year before I ran for board, that the school issues are community issues. And I believe that the best thing that we can do for our community is support our schools, is support the kids and the environment, that we really have an opportunity to dictate the quality of education in our district. And the idea that we're going to wait for the state to come in and help us, I think we will be waiting a long time, and it's not going to be near the kind of help that we expect, or I think that our district deserves.
Thank you. Okay, does anybody have any new or other business? Just real quick, the National Honor Society, if you noticed when you walked in, the chairs are set up. That induction is tomorrow morning at 9, correct? And also another thing, with all of this going on, one thing, if anybody wants to know how they can help, first of all, they can see Tim Moore, who's in the back of the room that spoke earlier, and give them your phone number or your email, because he's the one that, when probably June and July roll around, he'll be the one that will be pushing some of this stuff to get the levy passed, along with all the rest of us. If you haven't registered to vote yet, we have registration forms up here. For the kids, I know sometimes it feels like you can't do anything, but if you're going to be 18 before August, you can. You can register to vote, and probably most of you guys are in POD government. You've already, Mr. Bowley's already said all that. So, but the other thing you can do is go home and ask your parents if they voted for the levy, and if they did, then go to the next person. And when you see an adult, ask them, because that's word of mouth is the only way we can get it out. And by getting it out, by passing a levy, as you can see from what Dr. Hill presented, passing the levies are our only hope at this point. So we've been cutting and cutting, and you don't want to cut anymore. You don't want to cut tonight. It's the last thing we want to do. We've lost a lot of good teachers, and staff members, and we don't want to do that anymore. So it's nothing we want to do. I can guarantee you all the people up here are voting for the levy. So we're just making the difficult decisions. So if you want to do something, we can always use help. It seems like when the students talk, we seem to go a little bit further along. So I'd like to tell you to go tell your friends the same thing.
Also, if I can interrupt, we looked at, I don't think it was the last election, but the previous election, we looked at the breakdown of age of voters, and I believe from the age of 18 to 24, there were less than 100 people that voted. And that's the people that just recently graduated that are out there. So if you have older brothers and sisters, certainly please try to encourage them to go out and vote. You can do if they're away in college, you can do absentee ballots and those kind of things. So that's very important. Think about that. From 18 to 24, we only had, I think less than 50, but it certainly was less than 100 people that voted.
I think it was 6% of the voters.
It was really small. So.
It was small. Anybody else? Okay. Consent agenda?
Sure. So before we get into the consent agenda, I have some things we need to change around with the agenda. Because I want to walk you through this. It gets a little confusing, and I apologize for that. The first thing that we need to do is we're going to remove item J from the consent agenda and vote on it as a separate issue. Okay, that is the,
J and K? or-
just J. We're removing, and I'll tell you why, we're removing J. J is the issuing of contracts or salary notices for teachers. And I should have separated this out to begin with. If I don't remove this, Brian's going to have to abstain from the entire consent agenda because his wife is receiving a salary notice. So I want to remove that, and we'll vote on it as a separate item. Then the next change I need to make is after the consent agenda, as the agenda currently stands, you'll see there was an item 11 prior to executive session. We're going to move that to after executive session also, the suspension of contracts. So once we finish the consent agenda here, we're going to move into executive session. So executive session will become item 11. On the executive session, we also need to add 8 to the reasons that we're going in addition to D and E. So the order of things after the consent agenda then will go, item 11 will be executive session. Item 12 will be reconvening. Item 13 will be the item J that we're pulling out of the consent agenda. Item 14 will be current item 11, the suspension of contracts. And then items 15 through 18 are what you have on the addendum. And each of those items 13 through 18 will be voted on individually as opposed to one vote. Okay, everybody follow all that? Again, I apologize, that's confusing, but we had some changes take place here in the last, since this agenda went out in particular, but also today that has kind of changed things around a little bit. So we will fully anticipate action coming out of executive session, whatever time that is. So then looking at this consent agenda, I do have a few comments I want to make about a few of the items before it's recommended to you. Item A, which is this contract for Michael Hood, the aid contract. Just want to specify here, we had a resignation. So he is being recommended to fill the resignation position. And we actually reduced the hours by 1. So what had been a 4-hour position is now a 3 with this new person. Item D, the memorandum of understanding between Youngstown State and Waterloo for college and high school dual enrollment program. We have 2 teachers that have now been approved. Paul Phillips was approved a few weeks back to teach his AP calculus class as a dual credit class. What that means is that students that enroll in that class not only can take it for AP, but they can also take it and get college credit if they choose to, with some additional paperwork and other steps through Youngstown State, right here on our campus. Also, Brenda Elias, I think 2 days ago, or 3, was approved to teach her, I believe it's French 4, as a dual credit class also. So we're excited about that. Obviously, we're in the works too with Stark State and Katie Kane with our computer business stuff that we have there too. So we're making progress in that area. So there should be some options for the students. And the beauty of that is these are classes we're already teaching. We're not adding any overhead cost to be able to do the dual credit. So,
Real quick, Brenda's here.
yeah.
And we aren't doing, it's not costing us anymore, but it took more time for her, out of her time, to get qualified and get approved for that. So we want to thank her and Paul both for that, and Katie for going through what they're going through, because we know that takes extra time, and we appreciate it.
We very much do. And yeah, while we're thanking people, we also want to thank Debbie Morgan. Debbie Morgan is the one that is continuing to make contacts with the universities, the colleges, and get the meetings set up, and is kind of pushing this stuff forward. So we want to thank her for her involvement too. Item G and H. This has to do with the bus bids. We've opened bids different times. I just want to clarify a couple of things here. First, I want to remind everybody that even though we're approving tonight to buy a asking for approval to buy a $74,700 bus, on the same night we're cutting people. I want to remind everybody that this funding, where this comes from, is the PI account. The PI account was designated to be used largely for this purpose. The PI account cannot be used to offset our general operating revenue. It can't be used for salaries of the teachers that you saw up there. So that money is there. We're trying to keep our fleet up to date. We haven't got a new bus in 2 years. We've been trying to get at least one every year to keep our cycle up. We've talked about this in the previous meetings, but just to clarify, this is not money that we could use to help offset that $520,000. Why are there two items here? If you recall, initially, we opened up one set of bids and then came back the next month and asked to open up a second set, because what we found was that we believed that opening that second set and asking for stock bus bids may actually get the district what we needed at a cheaper cost, and that's actually the case. So tonight in item G, we're asking you to reject the bids from the first set we opened, and then accept the approval to buy what we have listed here, which came from the second set of bids. And then just a note, item K, we separated out. J is the contracts and salary notices for teachers. K is the contracts and salary notices for tutors. And even though we have people that you saw that are being reduced, especially with these tutors, we still have to go ahead with the formality of offering the contract, because they get the contract. And then those contracts become suspended upon the beginning of the next school year, which is July 1. So that's all I have. So, and I just wanted to, because this consent stuff is still new, I just want to point out again that the consent agenda does stop after treasurer business item D. Okay, that item 11 is a separate item that's not part of the consent agenda. Okay, so you're going to be voting on superintendent recommendations A through K, with removing J, and then treasurer recommendations A through D as part of the consent agenda.
Okay, can I have a motion to accept the consent agenda as corrected?
So moved.
Second? Second. Roll call?
Mr. Terry?
Yes.
Whittlesey?
Yes.
Gump?
Yes.
Fletcher?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Motion is passed.
Someone has to executive session.
Executive session. Okay. Can I have a motion to recess into executive session?
Make a motion.
Second? Second. Any questions or comments? Roll call?
Mr. Terry? Yes. Whittlesey?
Yes.
Gump?
Yes.
Fletcher?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Motion passes.
We're going to move to the Viking now.
We'll be back there. If you want to stay, you can. Students, it's up to you. You can stay or you can go. Normally, we don't have anything coming out of executive session, but tonight we will, so.